Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into the really intriguing realm of seduction.
Mm-hmm.
Now look, our aim isn't to give you a sort of how-to guide for manipulation. Definitely not.
Right, not at all.
It's more about unpacking the fascinating psychological forces that are really at play in attraction and influence.
Exactly.
You've shared Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction, which is, wow, quite comprehensive.
It really is a dense piece of work.
And we're here to kind of distill the core insights, find those aha moments that help explain why we're drawn to certain people, certain ideas.
Precisely. And knowing you appreciate, let's say, efficient knowledge will navigate this rich material, but focus on the underlying principle.
And the examples, some are quite captivating.
Definitely the captivating examples. Think of it as understanding maybe the machinery of attraction. It gives you a fresh perspective on human behavior, really, in everything from personal connections to broader social dynamics.
Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack this then. Let's dive straight into a concept that immediately, well, it sparked my curiosity. The dandy.
Ah, the dandy. Yes.
The book describes them as someone who kind of defies easy categorization. They intentionally craft this fluid persona, playing with traditional roles. What's the actual pull of that kind of, self-created ambiguity?
Well, what's truly compelling about the dandy, I think, is how they tap into a pretty fundamental human desire. It's about authenticity, maybe, and freedom.
Freedom from what, exactly?
Freedom from, well, societal pressures, the ones that often push us into these neat little boxes. The dandy's self-fashioned identity, it sort of suggests a liberation from those constraints.
Okay.
And this deliberate ambiguity, it can be incredibly alluring because it hints at something deeper, this idea that we all have, multifaceted selves that don't always fit neatly into those prescribed roles.
Right.
It's almost like they're saying, look, I make my own rules. And, well, that can be powerfully attractive.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about why certain, let's say, unconventional personalities throughout history have held such sway. Now, the book argues that successful seduction, or influence perhaps, often starts with a compelling character.
Yes, character is key.
Someone who radiates a quality that draws others in, almost subconsciously.
That's right. The argument is basically that this initial magnetic character acts almost like a Trojan horse.
Okay, the Trojan horse, how?
Once that emotional connection is established, people just become less aware, less critical of the subsequent strategies that might be at play.
I see.
And then the book introduces these 9 distinct seducer types. Each one embodies a core trait that exerts this powerful initial attraction.
9 types. Okay, let's maybe explore a few. First up, the siren.
The siren, yeah.
Someone who possesses and knowingly wields a potent sexual energy. The book mentions Renaissance figures deliberately emulating, like Grecian goddesses. What's the underlying psychology there?
Yeah.
Of that kind of overt sexuality as a lure.
I think the siren archetype, it directly addresses our primal desires.
Primal desires.
Yeah.
Huh?
By openly embodying sensuality, they sort of bypass social inhibitions, tap into a very fundamental level of human attraction. It's almost raw, an unfiltered appeal.
Right.
And that can be incredibly powerful. It cuts through the complexities of maybe more subtle approaches.
Okay. Then we have the rake.
Ah, the rake.
Characterized by an insatiable adoration for the opposite sex that somehow becomes infectious.
Yes, infectious is a good word for it. The example given is Fronsac at the court of Louis XIV.
How does that kind of boundless desire become attractive? It seems almost overwhelming.
Well, the rake's enthusiasm, it works almost like a form of social proof.
Social proof.
Yeah. Their constant pursuit, their appreciation, it suggests that the object of their affection must be truly desirable. It creates the sense of validation. And it can awaken a similar desire in the target, that feeling of, wow, if they find me so captivating, maybe I really am. It's like their desire acts as a mirror, reflecting back this enhanced sense of self-worth.
That makes sense. It's less about them, more about how they make the other person feel.
Precisely.
And then there's the ideal lover, someone who brings a sort of heightened aesthetic sensibility to romance. Gabriel D'Annunzio is mentioned.
Yes, D'Annunzio, whose very presence could apparently shift when he was interested.
What's the power of that approach, the idealized romance?
The ideal lover really caters to our deep-seated fantasies about romance, doesn't it?
I suppose so, yeah.
They create an experience that feels almost tailor-made. They pay exquisite attention to detail, making their target feel uniquely cherished, uniquely understood, almost on an artistic level.
Like living in a movie for a bit.
Exactly. It's about creating a perfect, almost dreamlike scenario, and that can be a really powerful escape from, the ordinary.
Okay, we touched on the dandy earlier. Then there's the natural.
Right, the natural.
Someone spontaneous, open, like Chaplin's little tramp. It's interesting that naivete itself can be alluring. What's the hook there?
The natural's appeal, I think, lies in their perceived authenticity, their lack of artifice.
So they seem genuine.
Yeah, in a world where we're often quite guarded, maybe strategic, their openness can be incredibly refreshing. Disarming, even. It evokes a sense of innocence, maybe vulnerability that can trigger protective instincts, or just a desire for a genuine connection.
Okay, so moving on from these, let's call them character types.
Right, the archetypes.
The book gets into specific strategic maneuvers. One that stood out to me was disarming through strategic weakness and vulnerability.
Ah, yes, that one's interesting.
The idea is that appearing weak can make your actions seem more natural, less calculated.
Yeah.
How does that actually work psychologically?
Well, appearing vulnerable, it can lower someone's defenses. Simple as that, really. It makes you seem less threatening.
Okay, less threatening.
And it can evoke empathy, maybe a desire to nurture or protect. So when you do act, it can be perceived as more genuine, less calculated, because you've seemingly presented yourself without any pretense, without power.
Right.
It sort of plays on our natural inclination to help those who seem less powerful, maybe.
That's almost like a kind of reverse psychology, isn't it?
In a way, yes. It's subtle.
Another strategy mentioned is confusing desire and reality, creating this perfect illusion by tapping into people's daydreams.
Exactly. This strategy really leverages our innate tendency to fantasize. We all do it. By painting a vivid picture, one that aligns with someone's deepest desires, and then suggesting, subtly perhaps, that you can help them realize those dreams. Well, you create a powerful emotional connection.
So you become linked to their fantasy.
Pretty much. You're essentially offering them a glimpse into a more exciting reality, and they naturally become drawn to you, the perceived architect of that reality.
Then there's the tactic of isolating the victim, taking them away from their usual support systems, their familiar surroundings. Psychologically, what makes someone more susceptible when they're isolated?
Well, isolation inherently creates a sense of dependence, doesn't it? And uncertainty.
I suppose so, yeah.
When you're removed from your familiar anchors, your usual sources of validation, friends, family, routine individuals can become much more reliant on the person who's brought them into this new, maybe slightly disorienting environment.
So they cling to what's available.
Exactly. This heightened dependence can make them more receptive to influence, more suggestible.
Okay. The book also talks about affecting a regression, subconsciously bringing targets back to early childhood associations, maybe parental figures. That sounds quite complex.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit manipulative.
It does sound complex, and yes, the ethical considerations are definitely present throughout the book. The core idea here, though, it touches upon attachment theory.
Attachment theory.
Okay. We all have these early experiences, right? With primary caregivers. And those experiences shape our expectations in later relationships.
Right. Secure, anxious attachments.
Yeah.
All that.
Exactly. So by subtly mirroring or maybe triggering those early dynamics, perhaps offering a sense of, unconditional acceptance or playful authority, a seducer might unconsciously tap into those deeply ingrained emotional patterns.
So the target feels a connection but doesn't quite know why.
Potentially, yes. It makes them feel a powerful, albeit often unconscious, connection. The book does caution about needing detailed knowledge for this one, though.
Okay, let's move to another one. Stirring up the transgressive and taboo.
Right.
What's the allure of pushing those social boundaries? Why do people find that attractive?
The forbidden fruit idea, essentially. It often holds a powerful attraction because it promises a sense of liberation, liberation from societal constraints, maybe a glimpse into our own shadow selves, the parts we usually hide in.
So it's exciting.
It's exciting, yes. Engaging with the transgressive can create this feeling of excitement and also a shared intimacy, a sense of us against the world, or breaking free from the ordinary together.
Okay. Then there's using spiritual lures, appealing to doubts and insecurities by focusing on the sublime, the spiritual. How does that work on a psychological level?
This strategy taps into a very fundamental human need, I think, the need for meaning, for purpose.
Beyond the everyday.
Exactly. By framing a connection in spiritual or, let's say, transcendent terms, it can bypass more rational doubts. It gets past the mundane insecurities about a relationship.
I see.
It offers the promise of something deeper, a more profound connection that, well, transcends the everyday. It can even link physical intimacy with a kind of spiritual union, as seen with someone like Natalie Barney.
Now, this next one, mixing pleasure with pain, that sounds a bit counterintuitive, maybe even unhealthy.
Yeah.
How can introducing pain possibly strengthen an emotional bond?
Yeah, it does sound counterintuitive, but it plays on a known psychological principle, intermittent reinforcement.
Like in behavioral psychology,
Oh.
training animals.
Kind of, yeah. When rewards, in this case pleasure, affection, are given inconsistently, when they're interspersed with periods of discomfort or pain, like withdrawal, insecurity, maybe even temporary breakups,
Okay.
the anticipation of the reward, the pleasure, it actually becomes more powerful. It creates a stronger emotional imprint. The uncertainty can lead to a more intense, sometimes even addictive bond.
So the lows make the highs feel higher.
Exactly. The contrast heightens the experience of pleasure when it eventually returns. The book argues against being too nice, suggesting it can become boring.
Interesting, okay. And then there's exploiting vanity and selfishness, using that desire for social validation. How does creating an aura of desirability actually make someone more attractive?
Well, our sense of self-worth is often, whether we like it or not, tied to how others perceive us. Social standing matters.
True.
So when we see that other people desire someone, it sort of validates their attractiveness in our own eyes. It's like, oh, they must be valuable if others want them.
Like pre-selection.
Exactly. Creating a sense of competition, or even just making it seem like others are interested, creating triangles, as the book calls it, can trigger our own desire to possess what is seemingly valued by others. It's social proof, again, but applied directly to attraction. Think of the Duc de Richelieu example with the two neighbors.
Right. What about the power of insinuation? Subtly planting suggestions. Why is that often more effective than being direct?
Insinuation works so well because the ideas seem to originate from the target's own mind.
So they don't feel like they're being persuaded?
Precisely.
Hmm.
It bypasses any potential resistance or skepticism they might have toward overt persuasion, towards being sold something. When someone believes they've come to a conclusion themselves, they're much, much more likely to embrace it.
It creates that aha moment we talked about earlier, but they think it's their own aha moment.
Exactly right. Very subtle, very powerful.
Then we have mirroring, conforming to others' moods, tastes, maybe even body language. What's the psychology behind why that works?
Mirroring taps into something very basic. Our inherent tendency to trust and, well, simply like people who are similar to us.
We like people who are like us. Makes sense.
Yeah, it creates a sense of rapport, of validation. When someone feels understood, when they feel that their own preferences or moods are being reflected back to them, their defenses naturally lower. They feel a connection.
Okay. Wow, we're covering a lot here. The book also discusses creating obstacles and forbidden fruit. We touched on the forbidden, but why is what's just out of reach or difficult to get so alluring in general?
The scarcity principle plays a huge role here. It's fundamental economics, almost.
Scarcity increases value.
Exactly. When something is perceived as difficult to obtain or rare or forbidden, its value tends to increase in our minds. The challenge itself can become part of the attraction. And the simple idea that something is off limits, like with Cristeta and Don Juan, can ignite a really strong desire to possess it.
Okay. Using the soft sell, making influence seem like organic events or just news. How does that build credibility compared to, say, advertising?
Well, the soft sell avoids triggering our natural defenses against overt persuasion, against being marketed to.
We have our guards up for ads.
Totally. When information or attention or even a political campaign like Andrew Jackson's seems to arise naturally, organically, rather than being overtly promoted, it just feels more authentic, more trustworthy.
Right.
We're much less likely to be suspicious of something that doesn't feel like a direct sales pitch.
And then focusing on the senses with attention to detail, the sensuous effect. How does engaging the senses create such a strong impression?
Engaging multiple senses, sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, it creates a much more immersive and crucially memorable experience.
More channels for the information to sink in.
Right. And it can distract the conscious, critical mind while evoking stronger emotional responses. Plus, thoughtful sensory details, tailored environments, specific gifts, orchestrated spectacles like Pamela Harriman was known for, they demonstrate attention and care.
Right. It shows effort.
Huge effort.
Yep.
It makes the interaction feel more significant, more impactful, less commonplace.
Creating the proper illusion? by maintaining a degree of distance. Why is a little mystery actually important? Don't we want closeness?
We do want closeness, but the argument here is that too much familiarity can, well, breed contempt, or at least erode the idealized image you might have cultivated.
So keeping some things hidden preserves the fantasy.
Exactly. By remaining slightly elusive, maybe a bit enigmatic, you preserve the fantasy. You prevent the target from seeing all your flaws, all your mundane realities too clearly. It keeps them intrigued, keeps them wanting more. Think of Eva Peron becoming Evita.
Maintaining the image.
Okay.
The power of the gaze, that nonverbal influence. What makes eye contact, specifically, so potent?
Oh, the eyes are incredibly expressive, aren't they? They play such a crucial role in social connection and communication, way beyond words.
For sure.
A directed gaze can convey confidence, interest, intensity. It can forge this powerful nonverbal link that bypasses conscious filters. Think of the descriptions of Fidel Castro's gaze, for example.
Right. That feeling of being truly seen, or maybe even pinned down.
Exactly. It's primal.
Okay, nearly there. Demonstrating proof through sacrifice or brave deeds. How do actions speak louder than words in this specific context of seduction or influence?
Well, actions that involve real effort or risk or genuine sacrifice, they demonstrate commitment and sincerity in a way that words alone often just can't match.
Talk is cheap, essentially.
Pretty much. Sacrifices like Count Gramont's efforts for Marion Delorme, they allay doubts. They provide tangible, undeniable evidence of your feelings or intentions, and that makes a much, much stronger emotional impact. It can redirect elicited emotions into affection.
And finally, the art of the delay. Mastering the climax, holding back. Why is delaying gratification so effective in building desire?
It comes back to anticipation, really. Delaying gratification intensifies anticipation and therefore desire.
Makes you want it more.
Precisely. By not immediately fulfilling the target's wishes, or maybe your own, you keep them invested in the pursuit. You build tension. And it makes the eventual reward, the climax, feel much more significant, more satisfying.
That makes them active participants.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. It turns them into an active participant in the seduction rather than just a passive recipient. They're chasing it too.
Wow. Okay, that's an incredibly comprehensive rundown of the types and strategies. And just briefly, the book also touches on the opposite, right? The anti-seducer.
Yes, absolutely. It contrasts these strategies with the qualities that actively repel people.
What are those generally?
The anti-seducer typically embodies traits like, well, deep insecurity, blatant self-absorption, a total lack of awareness of others' needs or psychology, clinginess, impatience, poor listening.
Things that just push people away.
Exactly. These qualities create distance and actively undermine any potential for attraction or influence. They repel.
So considering all these principles, these archetypes, these strategies, these anti-patterns, what are the key insights that really stand out for you? And how can, someone listening apply this understanding in their own lives, ethically, hopefully?
For me, I think the most profound takeaway is really the illumination of our underlying human desires and, frankly, our vulnerabilities. Understanding these drivers, the need for validation, the longing for fantasy and escape, the pull of the forbidden, the comfort of the familiar, it just provides a really powerful lens through which to view human interactions.
So it's less about the how-to and more about the why.
Exactly. This isn't about giving people a toolkit for manipulation, but about gaining a deeper empathy, maybe, for what motivates people, what makes them tick. The recurring theme of illusion, for instance, it just highlights our human capacity to be captivated by narratives, by carefully constructed realities.
We want to believe in something more exciting sometimes.
We often do. And the emphasis throughout on indirect influence, on subtlety, it underscores the power of allowing people to feel they're making their own discoveries.
That point about understanding underlying desires feels really key. It shifts the focus from just tactics to, well, genuine human psychology. And the self-awareness piece you mentioned with the anti-seducer seems crucial too.
Absolutely crucial. Recognizing both the potentially seductive aspects, charisma, attentiveness, confidence, and the anti-seductive aspects, insecurity, self-absorption within ourselves. That's vital.
Personal growth.
For personal growth, definitely. And also for building more meaningful, more effective, more authentic connections with other people.
This has been a truly, truly insightful deep dive into, let's face it, a complex and sometimes uncomfortable topic.
It definitely navigates some tricky territory.
So a final thought maybe for our listeners. Reflect on some of the examples we've discussed today. Consider the active role, often played by the seductees themselves, in their own enchantment. They seem drawn by their own needs, their own desires, their vulnerabilities.
That's a critical point. It's rarely a one-way street.
So what does that tell us about the nature of attraction and influence? That it's often maybe a collaborative dance, a kind of co-creation of illusion and desire between people.
That's a fascinating way to put it. A co-creation. The realm of human connection is just endlessly vast and intricate, isn't it? And we've really only begun to scratch the surface of the ideas presented in Green's work.
Absolutely.
Maybe listeners could consider which of these qualities, these strategies, resonate with their own observations of the world. You see them everywhere once you start looking at relationships, in marketing, in politics. How might understanding these dynamics offer perhaps new perspectives on your own relationships and interactions? Maybe even, as the book suggests, explore the lives of some of the figures we mentioned: Cleopatra, D'Annunzio, Marlene Dietrich, even charismatic leaders like Malcolm X or Lenin, to see these principles playing out in complex, real-world scenarios.
Food for thought, definitely. A lot to mull over.